This week we're working on Butterick 6282, a 1941 button-down dress, which I am actually using as a house dress for myself. And before we get into the bulk of making the dress, I'll go ahead and tell you that for the pattern, I ended up cutting two different sizes, one smaller for the bodice and a larger size for the skirt. So ultimately it ended up being a custom size for me, and in the end worked out very well. So the main fabric that I chose, I did not have quite enough of that to make the entire dress. So I was actually able to add in this accent fabric for some of the pieces like the bands and the pockets and the cuffs on the sleeves, which turned out really nicely. And honestly, I think it looks better than if I had been able to make the whole dress out of the main purple fabric. Now that I'm coming to the end of the prep work, I am getting to my pockets, and I just put those two pieces together, sew them so that I have an opening at the bottom where I can actually turn them out. And then I'm going to press them flat and do the same to the other, and those will be ready for me to attach later on. To finish the top edge of the pocket, I'm doing a triple stitch across about 1/4 of an inch at the top. And always you want to do this before you attach the pocket to the actual garment for obvious reasons. And then once I finish with that, I'm going to show you what that looks like. This is actually a nicer finish because it shows up a lot more than if you were just to do a simple straight stitch. Now I am going to work on the gathering, and I'm using the method, the floss method. Not sure if you have never heard of this, then it's something that you should definitely try. Buy some inexpensive regular floss from the dental section and pull out a piece long enough so that you will have enough of a tail left over at the beginning and the end. And then you're going to lay it flat over your seam allowance and do a zigzag stitch over top so that you aren't sewing all the way through it. And it basically creates a case, and then you can just very easily gather your piece together. As you can see here, it's much simpler than if you were to do just a traditional like regular thread or, you know, embroidery floss. However you do it, I find that this is the simplest method, and once you have attached your pieces, then you can adjust as I'm doing here. And it's just very easy. It's a very easy method to do. And then once you have sewn your pieces together, you can just pull the floss right out. I'm to the point where I need to be attaching this band to the bodice. So I have attached my shoulder seams, done the gathering, done all that. And so I've gotten to the point in the directions where it's attempting to tell me how I'm supposed to attach this. So I've already gone ahead and attached it at one point and gotten frustrated, and so I've figured out what they're trying to have you do. So this is the right side, this is the wrong side, and I'm going to pin this together and then sew that down, and then this is going to get flipped out, and this edge here will get folded under, and that's going to be edge stitched. So now that I've already attempted it one way, trying to figure out what they're talking about in their directions, and realized, you know, what's actually going on, I'll go ahead and film that, and then we'll move on to the next step. first step of attaching it is done. So now this has been turned out. So that's covered. And then this is going to get turned under and pressed. And this will be top stitched. So then this will come across and have the buttonholes, buttons all the way up here. So I'll finish that up, move on to the next step. This proved to be probably the most frustrating part of this entire project. And the advice that I would give is to shape it with pins as much as possible before you get it under your sewing needle. So here I'm getting to a point where I'm going to be doing around the neck, and you're going to see in just a second where I basically had to stop and just pin everything down because I was not able to get it under the needle and keep it flat. So once I was finally able to get that piece done, I moved on to all of the other prep work essentially. So I'm doing all of my darts, my pleats, sewing my sleeve seam together and getting all of that stuff ready so that I can attach everything else. And again, as I said before, I did a custom size so you can see nothing fits together. So I had to do some gathering on the skirt and ultimately use that same floss method, which works beautifully. And once I was able to get everything gathered together and attached, then it all went together much smoother than the first half of the project. So I'm at the point now where I should be attaching my continuous lap band. And the way that the directions explain it, this is my fold. So here's how big the piece is when you cut it out. And then you have a fold line right down the middle. And based on the directions, you're supposed to press half of it, you're supposed to press in the seam allowance. And then this seam allowance gets attached into this seam line, and so the continuous is just because it's one big piece of fabric, and then so it's supposed to attach in like this. Okay, this piece is, there will be a seam allowance here. This would get attached basically inside of this. So it would be attached like that. And then this is what's going to be visible. So this would be visible from the outside of the dress. And of course this bottom part here would be enclosed in a seam. And then it creates an opening for this closure here, because there's the buttons in the front, and then there's either a snap closure on the side or a zipper closure. So I'm not a real big fan of snaps in a dress, so I am not going to go for this option. So I am going to omit this continuous lap band. When I was thinking about it, this is just going to end up drawing the eye to a place where, I mean, I don't need it because I'm going to use a zipper to close this up. This is going to be the shield for my zipper. So if I was doing snaps, yes, I would put this in because then it makes sense because you have this opening where, you know, this acts as a snap band essentially. But because I am not going to use snaps, because the zipper blends in with the fabric a lot better, I don't want to draw the eye with this. So I'm just going to omit this step and just do a zipper closure on the side, and I'll just cut this. This is just something I have like when I order bulk zippers. So I'll just cut this down to size, and I'll finish this end here so that it's not going to scratch me, and then I'll use the shield behind the zipper. And then of course, if you don't know what a shield is, everybody has them on their jeans or pants, and what it does is it just protects your skin from being scratched by the zipper. So that's where we're at, and I have gone ahead, I have sewn my bodice to the to the skirt portion, and then I have started my seam at the top here. I'm going to put my zipper in. I'm just gonna go ahead, do the zipper, and then I will show you inserting the shield. As you can see, I am attaching the zipper now, and while you're watching this, I'm going to give you a little tip as far as attaching a zipper where you are going over top of a seam line. So once you do the first half of the zipper, you are going to want to match up your two seam lines just like that, and then put a pin in there so that you hold them together. I can't tell you how many times I have ripped out seams because that bodice and skirt seam does not match up from one side to the other on the zipper. So I would definitely recommend doing that anytime that you have a top and bottom that you are connecting. My zipper is attached. This is the underarm, and here is the shield piece. Now, the instructions tell you to fold it in half and to sew down along the seam allowance. So pretty much fold it in half like this, and then sew down along this seam allowance here. Basically create a tube, and then you're supposed to turn it inside out, tuck the raw edges under, and finish it. But because I have a serger, and because this is just supposed to be a day dress, basically a house dress, I am not going to go through that step because honestly I think it's fine the way it is. So what I'm going to do is I am going to line the shield up with the edge of my zipper. My hand out of the way. So I'm going to mimic this seam allowance. I'm just going to go down this side here, sew this down, and just attach it right along where the zipper is. Okay, so just right along that stitching line. And then as far as the bottom is concerned, I haven't quite decided. I'll probably go ahead and stitch it down at the bottom as well. And when I finished my zipper, I always melt the bottom of the zipper with a match, and then I do a bar tack on the bottom to keep any cut zippers from, if I run it down too far, I don't want to lose my pool. So go ahead and do that, and then we'll move on to the sleeve. Next, we're going to work on the sleeve, and to keep the original look of the sleeve, I am doing an extension, a cuff piece, onto a sleeve pattern piece that I know works for me. I personally have a difficult time with sleeves in patterns, so I'm just using something that I know is going to work. So what I'm going to do here is put the cuff together, and I have already sewn my sleeve together. And I'm going to go ahead and do my two cuff pieces, inside outside. I'm going to do a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And once I do that, I'm going to turn it and press it, and then I'm going to attach the printed side. So I'll just call the, not purple fabric, the printed side. I have a 1.5 inch seam allowance here. And I am going to match up my seams starting under the arm, and then just continue around, sew that down, and then flip that out, turn the purple fabric under, and then I'm going to sew that down, and then you can flip the cuff piece up. I know that moved a little quickly and I apologize for that. Hopefully that made sense to you. But it does help if you have the same fabric for both cuff pieces. You don't have to think about inside outside. Now that I've fixed my mistake, everything is pressed and ready. So this cuff gets turned out and pressed, and then I have attached it. I've attached the sleeve, and I'm gonna sew this down. So I start at this point under the arm with the seam, line these seams up because this is the only one on the sleeve, so I want them to match up, and then to create the pleat in this sleeve that I'm doing, because remember, this is a sleeve that I have drafted for myself. So I just follow the sleeve all the way up to the shoulder point, keeping the fabric flat, and then once I get to the shoulder point, the excess gets pressed down into this box pleat. So what I've done is, this is all the way up here, and then you can see this is my excess, and I have just pinned it down so that it creates that pleat on the outside. So I'll go ahead and sew that, and then this is almost done. The last steps that I have, I've just tried this on, and I'm definitely happy with the way that it fits. So I'm gonna go ahead and finish it up. So I have to add buttons and buttonholes. The buttons are gonna go up onto the shoulder. That's how it's done on the pattern piece. And then I'm going to add my pockets, do my hem, and then it is a little loose on me. So what I decided to do was just add a small piece of elastic right here in the band. And the reason that I'm doing that instead of doing a little bit more shaping is because this is just gonna be a house dress for me. So I'm not too awfully concerned about the, you know, whether or not it's gonna be a little loose on me. I kind of want it to be loose. So those are my last steps, and then we'll be all done. Now I'm attaching my elastic, and then I am going to be putting my pockets onto the dress, and I'm just doing a simple edge stitch. But one thing that I do want to point out is that I'm doing a bar tack in each corner of the pockets, and that's something that you want to make sure you absolutely do, so that the stress over time of using your pockets, you're not going to pull away from the fabric. Doing my automatic buttonholes, and thank God for time lapse because these are atrocious. And if you have ever used an automatic buttonholer, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So overall, the project, while there were some very frustrating parts in it, I did love how it turned out, and I'll definitely be wearing this a ton over the summer. So outside of the issues with the band and just a little bit of sizing issues, I would definitely recommend this, and I would maybe give myself a little bit of a break, but I would definitely make it again. Thanks for watching the video, and we'll see you in the next one.